Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes movies are vastly underrated. Perhaps it's because Robert Downey Jr.'s Sherlock was overshadowed by other, more popular Sherlock iterations of its time, or because Robert Downey Jr. himself was overshadowed by his then burgeoning role as Iron Man. But I choose to believe it's because the films fall into my absolute favorite trap, being so overwritten as to appeal only to me specifically. Rather than ending in a giant CGI battle, this film spends a frankly ridiculous amount of its climax on a chess match between the two intellectual titans, Sherlock Holmes and his arch-rival, Professor James Moriarty. As one might hope from a film depicting a genius-level intellect of this caliber, the scene is layered, both in the nuances of how the actual game of chess is being played, and by highlighting the strengths and flaws in the way both characters think and behave. It's also based on an incredibly famous real-life chess match, which means some nerd out there has probably spent dozens of hours analyzing it and comparing it to the movie. It's me. Now, for the purposes of this video, I'll assume you have some basic working knowledge of how chess the game works. Rooks move straight, bishops move diagonally, queens are valuable, and you have to protect the king or you lose. Things like that. If not, don't worry, I'll keep it as simple as possible and focus mainly on the character analysis, but you can also find some links in the description to some resources on chess.com where you can learn how the game is played. For those who never saw the film, or more likely you saw both RDJ Sherlock movies and cannot for the life of you distinguish which one was which in your memory, let's quickly summarize the plot. Part 1. Shall we play a game? Sherlock's rival, Professor James Moriarty, is at the center of a vast conspiracy that Holmes is trying to unravel. He's connected, though it's not clear how or why, to multiple bombings and assassinations involving key figures from the cotton and steel industries and a number of world governments. Eventually, Holmes learns that Moriarty has positioned himself to control multiple companies that sell supplies for war on an industrial scale. Everything from mass-produced weapons and artillery to bandages and medical supplies. With the supply ready, all Moriarty needs is the demand. He's befriended the British Prime Minister and is ideally placed to influence the nations of the world to war. The First World War. Sherlock's attempts to unravel the plot have to be delicate and precise because one misstep can lead to a global disaster. The two play by proxy, not doing battle with each other directly, because what good will that do? Instead, they use others as pawns, pieces in a larger game to reach their aims. The entire movie plays out both figuratively and eventually literally as a giant chess match between Sherlock and Moriarty. Both characters are angling to get an advantage over the other in a geopolitical game.
It's a game, dear man, a shadowy game.
This is highlighted early on when Holmes and Moriarty meet in the latter's office. Here, Moriarty reveals that he's poisoned and killed Irene Adler, which is not cool! Rachel McAdams deserves better than playing second fiddle to Sherlock actors. As he's monologuing about this, he grabs the Black Queen. Now, notably, in the game the two play at the end of the movie, Holmes sits on the black side of the board. This symbolizes an invasive move from Moriarty. He's grabbing a piece that's not his to take. That's not part of the game. The Queen is one of the most important pieces in chess, and Irene is one of the most important people to Holmes. That Moriarty has no reservations about going after either before the game has truly begun foreshadows that even though he puts on a veneer of respectability and decorum, he is a destructive, chaotic force that won't hesitate to break the rules if it becomes beneficial to him. Then we get this exchange.
If you attempt to bring destruction down upon me, I shall do the same to you.
If I were assured of the former eventuality, I would cheerfully accept the latter.
Now, it's Sherlock's turn to foreshadow. If, in fact, Holmes does manage to bring about the downfall of Moriarty, he would be happy to accept his own destruction. Not only is this in keeping with the general character of Holmes, a self-destructive personality who cares only about winning the battle of wits, even at the expense of his own health and life.
You're drinking embalming fluid.
Yes.
But it portends the specific end of the clash between these two intellectual titans. And then, Moriarty does this. Which looks cool, I guess? Like, it's not a legal move to open the game. It looks like there's just a pawn missing here or something. Also, wouldn't it be more symbolically correct to knock over the queen or take it off the board? I don't know. It's a cool shot. Doesn't really mean anything for chess, though. But alright, that's a good warm-up then, right? We can already see how this movie uses the pieces and moves of chess to symbolize the character drama that's playing out on screen. Moriarty and Holmes both use the people and tools at their disposal to wage a proxy war, and every choice is loaded with meaning not only for the game, but for the world around them. Now, while the movie is set in 1891, to get the full story of this game, we have to travel all the way back to 1966. Part 2. The Grandmasters. It was here, at the second Piatigorsky Cup in Santa Monica in 1966, that two Grandmasters played a game that would serve as the inspiration for the Sherlock Holmes movie. In this game, Bent Larsen of Denmark went up against then-world chess champion Tigran Petrosian for the second time at this tournament. This game is famous for the moment on move 25 when Larsen sacrificed his queen.
I'm in danger!
Long live the
Queen. Not to put his opponent in check, not to capture some valuable enemy piece, but to capture a single pawn. And he would then go on to lose his queen to another pawn shortly thereafter. It was dramatic, shocking, and according to Larsen, the most obvious way to win the game. This mirrors the way Sherlock Holmes defeats his nemesis in the film. By making a calculated sacrifice, he ensures that victory is inescapable. As Sherlock explains, it was not a difficult decision. The calculations are rather simple, and the sacrifice was of course planned. Wait, no, I'm sorry, that was Bent Larsen, who delightfully gloats in a very Sherlock manner. He wrote this in the post-game notes about how he gave up his queen in order to win, going on to add, spectators were said to have been surprised. What did they expect? Queen to rook 4? Yeah, totally. Okay, so I'm a little out of my depth here. So I reached out to National Master Sam Copeland of Chess.com and The Best of Chess on YouTube to walk me through some of the nuances of the Larsen v. Petrosian game.
This particular game is one that has really stood the test of time. The queen sacrifice is a really beautiful one. I think that this is probably Bent Larsen's greatest game.
As Copeland explained, sacrificing a queen to win a game isn't actually all that unique, but the manner in which Larsen sacrificed his queen was both elegant and rare.
It's not uncommon to give up the queen for some gain, to give up the queen to force checkmate on the next turn, or to give up the queen to set up some combination where you regain the material. That happens fairly normally. In this case, the queen is sacrificed and you're only getting one pawn right away. You pick up the knight afterwards, but you're still down a lot of material. And to succeed, basically, you have to craft a really beautiful checkmating attack that's not at all obvious.
In the real game, we don't actually get to see the result. Petrosian, realizing there's no winning move, resigns on move 30, which in reality is more often how it goes down. The best grandmasters in the world would rather concede than lose in a dramatic fashion. Fortunately for us, movies do want to show dramatic victories, so what follows in Sherlock Holmes: A Game of Shadows is one possible variation of how the game plays out.
A lot of the most beautiful ideas are kept behind the scenes because the defense is trying as hard as possible, fighting tooth and nail, to avoid this kind of dramatic finale where they're checkmated. But the movie allows a casual chess fan or a non-chess fan to see one of the most beautiful possibilities that in history was kept behind the scenes.
So, want to see the game that a world chess champion didn't want you to see? Cool, let's begin. Part 3. The final problem. Leading into the climax of the film, Holmes and Moriarty start a 5-minute game of blitz chess. That's the one with the clocks where players have to make their moves really fast. We don't actually see most of the game, and in fact the opening moves we can see are very different from the ones in the Larsen match. But at this point, the specifics hardly matter. While Holmes and Moriarty play outside on the balcony, Watson and Simsa are inside on a literal chessboard, trying to find Simsa's brother Rene, who has been surgically modified to look like the Romanian ambassador. His plan is to assassinate one of the world leaders in order to kickstart the first ever world war. Throughout the early part of the game, we're focused on the real-life moves. Sherlock says, "We both have two bishops," referring to Watson and Simsa on his own side, pitted against Moriarty's Rene and Colonel Sebastian Moran, a sharpshooter who serves as Moriarty's right-hand man. While Holmes and Moriarty banter, Watson and Simsa find Rene. They prevent him from assassinating anyone, narrowly avoiding global disaster.
This is not the start of World War III.
With Rene in custody, they now have the evidence they need to prove Moriarty is behind the plot to start a war. Except, at the last minute, Moran poisons Rene, killing him before he makes it out of the hallway. Sherlock's use of the bishop metaphor here is appropriately fitting. In a game of chess, victory or defeat is dependent on capturing your opponent's king. In this case, it seems like the ultimate goal is to prevent a world war. To Watson, Simsa, Mycroft, and any of Holmes' other allies, this is the most important task. But once this plot is stopped, Holmes and Moriarty understand that there's more game to play. After this, Moriarty monologues about how the war he tried to start is inevitable, raising the question of why he even bothered in the first place, but I don't know, I guess being a professor is boring. And who doesn't enjoy a little warmongering in their spare time? But Moriarty still feels like he's won. Sure, Holmes stopped this world war, but Moriarty still has a fortune tied up in arms and war materials. With Renee, Holmes could have gone public about Moriarty's plan, but now Renee is dead. Just as Irene Adler is dead. Every time there is someone who can expose Moriarty, every time Holmes has a piece on the board that can end the game for real, they die. And it's here where the movie picks up the match played by Larson and Petrosian, right at the moment of the Queen's sacrifice.
I think you've just lost your most valuable piece.
Sherlock won the battle, but he lost the war, or so it seems.
Bishop takes knight, check.
The game is over.
Moriarty wants Sherlock to walk away right now. In chess, if a player can't find a winning strategy, they can choose to resign. In fact, that's exactly what Petrosian did in his match against Larson at a later point in the game. Here, Moriarty is bluffing. He wants Sherlock to believe that losing Renee, like losing Adler, is the game. After all, how could he win without his most valuable pieces? The thing is, Moriarty's king is still in danger. By taking Moriarty's knight, Sherlock's bishop has a direct line on his opponent's king. Moriarty has no choice but to deal with the threat.
About that fortune of yours, I believe it's just been substantially reduced.
Check.
King to rook 2.
In this move, Moriarty dodges. His king falls back to a2, avoiding the threat from the bishop. He's concerned, but it seems like the kind of threat he can easily sidestep. Meanwhile, Sherlock tips his hand at the real threat, a red leather-bound book that Moriarty keeps on himself at all times. Whatever is inside is so important to Moriarty that he won't ever let it out of his sight, and Sherlock knows about it. If he can get his hands on that book, it's game over for Moriarty. So, Sherlock reiterates his threat.
Rook to king's rook 3. Check.
Now, Sherlock is closing in from two angles. His rook threatens the king on the A file. The king can no longer escape by hiding. All of the spaces that the king can move to are threatened by Sherlock's rook, or his bishop. Moriarty has to defend his king directly. And so, Moriarty checks for his notebook. It's still there in his pocket, safe. It doesn't matter if Sherlock knows where it is, so long as he can protect it. With a renewed sense of confidence and security in his position, he turns back to Sherlock.
Bishop to rook 3.
With this move, he blocks Sherlock's rook from taking the king. This move also presents a bit of a conundrum. Sherlock could take Moriarty's bishop with his own rook, putting the king in check again. And the king couldn't just take the rook because he's being threatened by one of Sherlock's own bishops here. However, if he did that, Moriarty's king could move one space over and be much safer. So instead, Sherlock plays it safe until he knows exactly how to win.
Its importance was not fully apparent to me until it occurred. That with an empire so enormous, even you must keep a record of it somewhere. Bishop takes bishop.
Sherlock takes Moriarty's bishop with a bishop of his own. This move doesn't, in fact, put Moriarty in check, but it does threaten checkmate in one move. If Moriarty leaves his rook where it is, Sherlock can take that rook, once again revealing his own rook that threatens the king, and any spot the king can flee to would be threatened by bishops. There would be no cover left. So Moriarty does the only thing he can do, go on the offensive.
Rook to bishop 4.
This moves his rook out into the open, where it can block Sherlock's rook if he tries to use it again, and potentially allowing it to take other pieces. He wouldn't make it easy, but Sherlock would need to get his hands on the notebook, and to get it,
I would need to endure a considerable amount of pain.
once again, this echoes the themes of sacrifice. Lest we think Sherlock is only willing to sacrifice others to win his game, he also gets strung up on a meat hook just to get close enough to swap the two notebooks, leaving only the final problem.
But the notebook would undoubtedly be encoded, so how then to break the code?
What follows is a flurry of desperate blows as Moriarty tries to defend both his secrets and his king.
Rook takes rook.
Holmes takes Moriarty's rook, one of his few remaining powerful pieces left on the board.
Pawn takes rook.
Moriarty won't let Sherlock get away with that, so he takes Holmes' rook in return.
Bishop to bishop 7.
Now, this is an incredibly elegant move. Here, Sherlock is closing the jaws of the trap. This bishop now threatens two more of the squares the king could possibly escape to. He hasn't put the king in check just yet, but there are almost no safe squares left. There's only the spot where the king is, and the furthest corner of the board. Moriarty and his king are both metaphorically and literally backed into a corner. So Moriarty tries one more dramatic move.
Queen takes knight pawn.
Now, okay, I hate to bring the dramatic tension to a grinding halt, but this isn't actually accurate. Given the position we know the board to be in, it's not actually possible for the queen to take any pawn. What most likely happened here is that Moriarty's queen moved to g3, putting Holmes' king in check, a position easily maneuvered out of by recalling his king to a8, at which point the move Moriarty says out loud can actually occur. His queen takes Sherlock's pawn on g7, which places him one move away from winning. If, for whatever reason, Sherlock doesn't do what he does next, Moriarty can move his queen to g8, trapping the king in a position it can't get away from, with absolutely no other pieces in any position to support it, which is exactly the position Holmes finds himself in standing on that balcony. We already know that Moriarty has no qualms about violence. He's had Irene Adler killed, he's had Renee killed, he was a boxing champion at Cambridge, making him a physically dangerous force all on his own, and he's alone on a balcony with Holmes. None of Sherlock's friends, not Watson, not Mycroft, no one are close enough to help. If Sherlock can't win right here, right now, then he is done for. He has one move left, he has to make it count.
Does the art of domestic horticulture mean anything to you?
And that finally puts the fear in Moriarty's eyes. In an earlier scene, we, like Holmes, caught glimpses of Moriarty's book, The Art of Domestic Horticulture, as well as a poorly kept box of flowers by the window. Clearly, Moriarty hasn't learned a damn thing about keeping his flowers alive, which means he has some other reason for owning this book. To a mind like Sherlock's, this is a little bit like having a folder on your computer called Definitely Not Porn, which, as we all know, is code for "This is where I keep records of all my illegal business." At long last, Holmes reveals what's been true all along. He already has the Red Notebook. He knows how to read it, and his colleagues back in London are already using it to confiscate Moriarty's ill-gotten fortune.
The most formidable criminal mind in Europe has just had all his money stolen by perhaps the most inept inspector in the history of Scotland Yard.
My God, Sherlock, you are such a dick to people who are helping you. Anyway, Moriarty finally checks his notebook to discover not the record of his empire, but a flipbook, taunting him with the reveal that actually he was the one on the hook the whole time. And Sherlock makes his final move.
Bishop to bishop 8. Discover check. And incidentally, mate.
But okay, here's what makes this extra delicious. Did you catch that discover check bit there? That's a special kind of check that occurs when one piece moves out of the way of another, revealing the real threat. In this case, Sherlock's bishop moves from a3 to c1. The bishop itself doesn't put the king in check, but it reveals the rook that's been hiding on a6 since 5 moves ago. It now threatens the king on the entire a file. Meanwhile, the bishop on c2 covers both b1 and b3, while the freshly moved bishop covers b2. It's a bit like pulling back the curtain on a giant cannon that's aimed at a watchtower when it's too late to climb down.
That's not fair.
As Copeland explained to me.
It's a little bit like you've got, a pistol and you've cocked it, everything's ready to go. And in this case, even though the opponent sees the discovered check coming, there's just nothing to be done.
Sherlock's bishop casually steps out of the way to reveal that Moriarty has been fucked the whole time. In the same way, Sherlock had already bested Moriarty before he sat down at the table. He knew, even as they spoke, that Moriarty's fortune was already being emptied. All he had to do was prevent the World War that Moriarty never could have profited from anyway, but that still would have killed countless people. It's at this point that Sherlock gets to live out the final move that he always knew was coming.
I'll give my life to see his demise.
Both foes stare each other down, playing out yet another fight scene in their minds. As Sherlock has done countless times before, he plans out a fight in advance, only this time he knows that Moriarty can do so just as well. With his shoulder injured and no hope of overpowering him, he makes the final sacrifice play, grabbing Moriarty and pulling them both over the side of the balcony, plummeting to their deaths. I mean, or at least it could have been. In the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story the scene is based on, Holmes plummets to his death, and Doyle doesn't pick up Holmes again for another decade, which is a really cool and dramatic way to end the series. But no! The movie goes ahead and shows us that Holmes used a little oxygen thingy that apparently makes you invulnerable to rocks, so I guess he survived because we have to know that he's alive for the sequel that you aren't going to make for another, oh look, it's still 10 years anyway. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's okay. It's fine. The movie is still cool. Yeah, The cruelest irony of the entire scene, though, is that while this scene is both elegant and dramatic, with precise moves carefully choreographed to make the plot moments line up perfectly with one of the most perfect versions of one of the most perfect real-life chess games ever played, it also accidentally kind of portrays Moriarty as a big dummy? Because while it's dramatically and filmically appropriate for Moriarty to be stunned by his loss, a real chess grandmaster wouldn't be shocked by a checkmate at the very last move. As Copeland explained,
in a game like this, Larson and Petrosian are both calculating 8 moves ahead. They see the whole thing playing out. They both know exactly what each other is up to. And really, Petrosian knew that he was lost long before he resigned the game. Once the queen sacrifice is offered, when the queen sacrifice is offered, there is no more defense. It's actually a beautiful almost finale to the game, even though there are multiple moves to be played out. When white plays the best moves, there's absolutely no way for, in real life, Petrosian to save this game, or in the movie for Moriarty to save this game.
So yeah, Professor James Moriarty, pretty stupid. Hey, guess what? I'm not dead. I'm in a new place. That's why it took so long. That's why I haven't been on for a while. I'm now shooting in a new location, rolling around in a dumb chair. I've moved. I've now settled in. I'm finally back to making videos. And while I was gone, y'all showed up. Just hit 20,000 subscribers sometime between the last video and this one. So I don't know. I might do a Q&A or something. I have made a Patreon now, though. I think 11 or 12 people discovered it before I announced it anywhere, so kudos to y'all. Thank you very much, and if anyone else wants to help support me, I'm going to try to start doing this as part of my actual job a little bit. I'm still freelance, I'm still doing other stuff, so I can't promise anything too quickly, but I'm going to try to be more regular. Now that I can actually maybe hopefully sort of make a living on this, and you can help. Link for the Patreon is down below, as is everything else. Sam Copeland, by the way, huge thanks to Sam for helping me with this one. His channel is in the description as well, as is chess.com, which is just an amazing site if you're really into chess. They've got lessons, they've got tutorials, they've got exercises, they've got online matches against people who are amazing at the game, so you can learn from people, you can play around yourself. They're not sponsoring this video or anything, they're cool people. I like talking to them. Yeah, by the way, I really like doing these breakdowns of like game scenes in movies. I've got a couple ideas for some others that I could maybe do in the future, but if you know of any scenes, feel free to let me know if there's any that you might want me to break down. In addition to the people on this side of the screen who have already supported me on Patreon, I want to thank Deanna Ogle and Thelon. If you'd like me to read your name out at the end of the credits, that's the Hork-Bajir. Of course, my Patreon tiers are Andalite themed. What else did you expect? But yeah, check that out, and I'll see you next time. I don't know how to end videos.